But when it comes to the performance stuff, there's, like you said, there's just this is how it was said to be done and how you're supposed to do it. So now we continue to give those same cues and those same advice, and this is what we know. So you just keep passing that down. And again, having that outsider perspective coming in and being like, you know, you guys are doing so much of this not right, or you're telling kids that this is how you're supposed to do things, and that's just not how it works. So it would probably be better to have more updated, correct information on this stuff so you can produce kids, or even more, you want them to get better. They're going to get better quicker by giving them the right stuff to do and the right cues to do. So it's been cool. This is where I like the dance world, is like, you guys are athletic. So
especially nowadays, like, it's turning more into that. It wasn't like my mom when she was teaching it, like, that's not what the world was. It wasn't for dancers to be like this physically inclined and demanding, to where it's like nowadays, like, what they're capable of doing is insane. Like how kids dance, or how, you know, just people dance. Like,
and I would even say
the baseline is upped.
I would say in that era, this stuff would still be helpful, because
yeah.
Like, you're just creating more efficiency and more connectivity and more all of the good stuff. It's not that it's not that they need to be required to do more extreme stuff. It's just getting better at the thing that they're already doing.
Sure.
But dancers are so athletic in specific ways, but they don't train the strength and the mobility. They don't train in athletic performance. They train in like what they heard through dance world, and it's passed down of what you're supposed to do. You know, it's a bunch of cardio stuff, a bunch of abs, a bunch of stretching, and it's like, okay, we did our like good workout for dance, and it's like,
but none of it is correlated for dance.
Yeah, and it's like there's the very baseline. Oh, we're gonna be dancing, we're out of breath, so maybe we should do cardio stuff. It's like, okay, cool. And then it's, well, dancers need a really strong core, so our workouts are just gonna be like all abs. And it's like, okay, you're like trying to connect A and B, but really you're connecting A and Z, and there's all these other things in between.
Because those functions also don't even match that up. It's like, okay, we need strong cores and stable cores to be able to move around and have structure, but then we're doing crunches.
Right.
It's like, and that again is a lack of knowledge of the functions of the body and how you train things. But it's like, yeah, we all look good. Like, our abs look good. Most dancers' stomachs look really good. But it's like, yeah, you train the pretty muscles. It's like the same way if you're working out. It's like, oh, I need a stronger core to do deadlifts. I'm not going to go do a bunch of crunches.
No, right. So, yeah, so it's fun to come into the world where there's not athletic performance in the idea or in the mind. That's like, oh, you guys are missing out on so much benefit. And this is where I can put this in and get really good results and help in all these fields. And it's like, what's going on with this? This is weird. This is different. And it's like, well, yeah, this is how athletes train. This is how people who move their body are supposed to train for the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you're dancing all around the stage and moving your body in all these different ways. A football player does the same thing on the field. And it's like, they're doing athletic performance training. They're not going like, well, we run sometimes and we have to catch sometimes, and, you know, well, it's good to have a strong core.
So let's just run a bunch and catch some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that which is also, it's true in every world, I'm sure, there's those little advice things, or there's little things of like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it and how you're supposed to think about it. And it's like, that's just not how the body works. The thing that will forever get me is when you're lifting your leg up, you need to lift it with your glutes. Impossible. That's not how the body works. That's just not how the body works. You can't lift your leg using your glutes. You're using your quads and your hip flexors. And this is so nails on the chalkboard to dancers and dance teachers and that whole community. But go look at any sort of movement physical diagram, anatomy. Physical anatomy. You can't lift your leg with your glutes. your glutes are actually relaxing and becoming more stretch out when you lift your leg in front of you. They're not activating.
And any range, whether it's even to the side, like.
Yeah. It's your hip flexors and your quads. So why do we continue to teach kids that think about that and use that to lift your leg? It's like, I've had so many conversations with people of like, yeah, I just like have all this hip flexor pain all the time and I lift with my glutes, so I don't know why it's
every
happening.
Dancer ever has hip problems.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but you're not lifting with your glutes. That's not how it works. You are lifting with your hip flexor, but because you've been told to lift with your glutes, you're now using as little amount of muscle fibers to lift your leg as possible. And now you're getting all this overuse injury while using 20% of what you could be using to lift your leg because you've been cued wrong. You've been cued to only use your glutes. So now you're not trying to lift your leg with your hip flexor when that's really the only thing that's going to lift your leg in front of you, along a little bit with your quad. Andy Galpin did a great example on the Max Lugavere podcast of activating muscle fibers and like what it can look like. And they had a cup of water sitting in front of him. And he's like, okay, grab the cup of water. And he's like, put tension on it, but not enough to where you lift it. So you can kind of pull up on the cup a little bit. You're creating tension, but you're not lifting the cup. You're activating a certain amount of muscle fibers. Now lift the cup up. You're activating more muscle fibers now. That's what's going on in the body when we're doing these things and lifting our legs and moving our arms and that sort of thing. So you can control to an extent how many muscle fibers you're using to do these movements. Another example is when you see something and that somebody tells you to pick it up and you're like, wow, that looks really heavy. I'm going to go try to really lift this up. And it's actually super light. You fling it up and you almost lose balance. That's because you've cued your CNS to activate a lot of muscle fibers to lift this thing, and it actually ended up not being that heavy. Well, when you're telling dancers to lift their legs, but only use their glutes, and by all means don't use your hip flexor or your quads, you're telling these dancers to use minimal amount of muscle fibers to lift them when they should be using 100% of it if they can. And that's going to look just as, if not even more controlled and fluid and pretty, quote unquote, because they're actually connecting to what's lifting the muscle or lifting the leg. And it makes sense in the head and it makes sense in the body. But it's these weird things of let's not look into it or question it or like. And I get it. Like, it's just the information that's passed down. So you continue. And I understand maybe some people do know this and they're like, yeah, but you want to cue them in that way so that they have the idea, so that their hips stay underneath them. They have the pelvic tilt in the correct position and all that. The tailbone, the monkey tail in the water, all that kind of stuff. That's great. Tell them all that, but then tell them to lift with the correct muscles because.
Or just have different cues.
Yeah, just create different
cues that still make sense.
Because there's a part of it where they're not going to have as many injuries with it because they're actually using most of their muscle fibers to do these movements, and then they can handle that. It's like one person, take a weak person and have them lift 100 pounds. Now take a strong person and have them lift 100 pounds. Think of that in the sense of activating muscle fibers. I'm going to activate the weak person to do it. It's going to be really hard for them and a lot of strain, and they're not going to want to do it a lot, and it's going to be hurting. Or you take the strong person to do it, and they can handle it and do it all the time. It's like their legs and hip flexors are probably strong enough to do this if you have them activate them.
I think one thing that is really incredible with athletes that they focus on is it's so much about the efficiency versus how it looks. But then I think when you can disconnect from just it might look funky at first, or like when you go to more of the mechanics and the efficiency of how your body moves, you will then be able to figure out how to make it look pretty because that's just what we do. But like, I think another cue, I guess, that you hear a lot is like you're moving from your back. Like you're doing shunnies across the floor, like you're moving with your back, like have your back follow you. It's like, but movement doesn't come from your back. Like think about moving from your hips.
Yeah.
It's like if you move with your hips, everything else should follow suit, or you can find a way to make everything else look good with it. But if your hips are not what is the control center and not controlling you, yeah, you can move with your back all day long, but the efficiency isn't there. You're going to be out of alignment. That's where injuries happen. That where it starts to like just look a little bit off, or that's where you probably have a lot of your students where you're like, I just can't figure out why they are not getting this, or why they can't get to that position in time, or why like that transition just looks funky. It's like because they're moving from the wrong body parts.
Yeah, well, and like you said, just change the cues. That's what I've always thought is funny is working out or training people, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this if they went through sports or they went through dance, where like, say somebody's telling you that Chaney across the floor, but use your back and, you know, lead with your back or whatever, move with your back. And you're trying to do that. And they're like, you just got to do this, or you got to do that and whatever. And then one of the times it's like, I'm just tired of doing this, so whatever. And then you just kind of float across the floor and do it in a more natural way without thinking about that. And they're like, yes, perfect. And it's like, that's your cue that this is a bad cue. And this cue does not make sense, because it shouldn't be they're cueing you and it's getting worse or it's looking wrong, and then you just fling across the floor without thinking about it, because you're probably just doing a more natural movement to you at that point. And then they go, yes, that's exactly how it should be. Well, the cue is bad then. This isn't working. If I'm telling somebody, okay, we're going to do squats, put the weight on your heels, sit back, like rotate your hips, butt to the ground, come back up, hips forward and all that. And it's just looking bad and it's weird and it's wrong. And then I'm like, okay, don't think about it and just squat. And they do that. And I'm like, that looked a lot better. What is not connecting here? It's like the things that I'm telling them to do, they're not connecting to that. It's a bad cue. So you have to change the cues.
Yep.
And it's probably going to become even individualized for kids. There's some really great elongate the spine. That's pretty obvious to a lot of people. And that gets you what you want. If you were to say something that's not elongate the spine, but like,
well, but even that, you think of a 3-year-old,
weird cue,
they're not going to elongate the spine. What the heck does that mean to them?
Well, sure. Yeah.
So it's like, what is the mechanics of the body that will make the elongation happen so that you're able to cue the individual functions?
And it has to be, the cue has to be in the direction of what you're wanting to accomplish. But also it has to follow what the body actually does. And I think that's the problem with the lift your leg with the glutes. Okay, what you're wanting is them to keep their hips underneath them.
And their legs to be high.
And their legs to be high. And I understand that. But the result that you're getting is a bunch of pulled hip flexors, because they're not activating the correct muscles to do this movement. So it's like, if you're telling kids to elongate their spine, that's great, but how many kids are just doing that and they're not activating maybe what they should be doing? They're elongating the spine and now they're shrugging up really top. No, that's not what we want. So it's like, depress the shoulders, lift the chest, whatever things are going to work to get the actual activation that you want. And I think this is where you get into the nitty gritty of like what the muscles are actually responsible for and what they do. And like the leg example, you just have it wrong that glutes lift your legs in front of you. Glutes rotate the hips back and forth. They don't lift legs up in front of them. That's just that's not what they do. It's like asking somebody to do a bicep curl, but lift with your tricep. Well, no, the tricep extends the arm. The bicep curls the arm. We'll do a bicep curl, but use your tricep. It's like, that's not how it works. That's what you're telling dancers to do. It's just simply not how the body works. You can't switch it. You can't change it. You can get them to think about it in a way of tuck your tailbone, lift the leg with your hip flexor. Maybe if you don't want the quad flexed, don't flex the quad. If you want it flexed, flex the quad. Like, there's so many better cues that actually go with what the body is supposed to do. So we can't just keep doing these like hand-me-down sayings that, well, this just doesn't apply. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, like we would at the bar, like leg developed out, and then our teacher would come around and like tap on our quads and see that they were relaxed.
Yeah, to where, okay, wonderful. But if you do that, you're putting all of the load on the hip flexor. So your hip flexor better be very, very, very strong, which is possible.
Yeah.
But
and I think
that's not what's being told.
The lack of thinking about that of, okay, so now a lot of load and a lot of functioning is happening from the hip flexor, but then we're not training the hip flexors to be strong.
Exactly. It's all about avoiding the hip flexors. The hip flexors are probably the most important set of tendons inside of athletes because it's all the hips. And that's where you're generating everything. And like what you're saying, well, move with your back. Well, that's just not what it's going to be. So why not train the hip flexors to be bulletproof? So then when we're actually doing these exercises, nobody's pulling muscles, nobody's too weak to do it. They can do all these things of extend the leg and have the quad be more relaxed and all of that good stuff. But there's just there's not the knowledge of body mechanics and how the body works and what is activating and flexing and relaxing and all of those kinds of things. It's like when you go to teach like any popping stuff. If you understand what muscles are responsible for that, you can give really great cues so that the kids know what popping they're supposed to, where it's coming from, what they're supposed to be doing. It'd be the same thing of like, okay, we're going to do a bunch of popping stuff. So when we do this, like you really want to, activate your chest and your bicep. And it's like, well, if I'm just extending my arm out this way, I'm actually relaxing the chest. I'm stretching it out and I'm stretching out my bicep. So that makes no sense to do popping from there because that's not how the body works. You're just giving wrong cues that aren't aligned. It would be the tricep and the rear delt and the back that's doing that, not these areas that's not how the body works. So I think there's a lack of knowledge there that if there's more knowledge there, it can make a lot of those problems go away. And the trouble is you've had these cues that have been passed down that people don't want to come up with new cues.
Well, I think it's also that like we have this idea that that's correct because that's what we were bred into believing.
Yep.
But okay, so like let's break down some actual like movement mechanics and how you could make them better or where we're going wrong. I want to kind of get into like what are some main things that you noticed that were like, why are you guys doing it that way? That makes no sense. Like, so like stretching in the beginning of class kind of thing. But first, I want to break down like, okay, so like say turnout. Like, how would you train for dancers to get better turnout to where it makes sense and it's
better?
Mechanic?
Like, because almost all the dancers have the flexibility to do that.
Right. But actually to be able to dance from it and produce power from it and it not cause injury. Because I think a lot of us, we're more turned out. We stand that way. Mm-hmm. But that's where the injuries start to come in is because you don't have any control over that.
Well, and I think
it's like you're doing pliés. Your turnout is great. It's clean. But then your knees are not going over your toes.
Oh,
sure. Like you could be turned out knees down. You can kind of rotate from your hips, but do we even know where that's coming from? And like how to be able to function through that?
I think when it comes to most dancers that have the turnout thing, I think the first part you have to understand is what you're putting your body into there. Is I'm having this pizza feet and my knees are in line with my toes. So my hips, my knees, my feet are all externally rotated. And what kind of stress is that doing on my musculature? Well, the hip flexor that runs from the outside down to the inside of the knee. A lot of dancers have problems with this. Inside of the knee or kind of outside of the hip flexor part. You're turned out, which is causing that muscle to elongate even more. If you turn in, you're going to shorten that muscle. It might be slight, it might be little, but over time, that is adding up to a lot. So thinking about that muscle getting stretched out and it's more underactive, you're dealing with something that's going to be really weak, really stretched out. So we're not stretching it. It's already too stretched out. And now the opposite is happening where I'm turning my feet out. Naturally, what happens is you start to flex your glutes. So now you're getting all this overactivation.
And overactivation does not mean strong.
No, it means you're using it too much and it's going to cause injury. You're getting all this overactivation in your glutes because of that turnout just naturally starts to bring the hips forward and flex. So now you're getting all this overactivation in the glutes. That's where the stretching should be happening.
And what stretches do we do? All hips, all hips, all hips. Butterfly stretch, straddle stretch.
Yeah, to where you're already practicing being in that position all the time. It's stretched. There's no more stretching that needs to be done in this open planed field. It's all, cross body. What you should be stretching out is like the IT band area or the glute area, not the inside of the legs. The inside of the legs are already too stretched out. And I think even when it comes to the hamstring part of it too, you're putting a decent amount of load on them, but the hamstrings are probably really weak, and that's why they get pulled a lot of the time, because most of your movements are coming from a little bit of bend and
snap, explosion,
leg extension. That's where you're getting so much of your movement is leg extension. You're not doing a lot of explosive movements or just over time use of leg flexion where you're crunching up the hamstring. You're going, heel to butt type of thing. There's not a lot of that happening. Most of what's happening in your movements is all extension. So again, your quad is going to be really overactive. That is going to need more recovery, maintenance, stretching out type of stuff. The hamstring is going to be the one that's really underactive, and you're going to want to strengthen that, not stretch it a whole lot. It's like dancers are super flexible in their hamstrings. Yeah, because they never work them. They're super flexible in the hamstring. You're never, all you're doing is stretching them and elongating them. They're never in a flex position. And that's where you see a lot of athletes, football players specifically, they usually have really strong hamstrings because of all the running that they're doing, the stances that they have to be in, where they're generating power and pushing forward is a lot from a bent leg position, to where dancers don't really have that resistance of, I'm in a bent leg position, I really need to go for something. You're mostly bending the knee slightly, but then you're having this explosion from calf quad. It's not being generated from the hamstrings, so you're not pushing against anything a lot of the time. So that's another one is the calves. Like the overuse of the calf muscle is probably extreme. And that is something that I would stretch as well. Dancers are, everything's pointed toe. Well, when you point your toe, a lot of the time that naturally happens is you start flexing your calf. Or you're doing plies and you come up, that's great and all. When you come up to on the toes, say whatever you want about where you're lifting from, whatever, your calves are doing the work. You can come up with any, my head is lifting me to the sky, whatever. Your calf muscles are getting activated. I don't care what. That's body mechanics.
Yeah.
It's what I'm here for. So the calves are getting really overactive, and that's what you should be recovering. Anything that's overactive, meaning I'm using this muscle a lot, should be stretched and should be recovered and gently used and probably warmed up the most. The things that are really underactive need to be strengthened. You need to strengthen them. That's why so much of the stuff that I'm doing with the kids is hamstring. Like we're deep squatting, we're doing like pushing movements, jumping movements, athletic movements that are coming from a bent knee position and pushing against something, having resistance, doing stuff that way. Because when you have these imbalances of something's really overactive and something's really underactive, this is where the injuries start to happen. So you want to try to balance that out as much as you can. And especially if something's overactive and you're using it too much, it needs a break. That's where muscles recover and they eventually become stronger, is you need to give them rest. So if we're just only ever doing, leg lifts with the hip flexor, Well, eventually, yeah, it's going to get so beat up and tired, it's going to pull or it's going to ache. It's going to cause just pain and discomfort and whatever. We need to take a break. We need to do something else. And other things need to be strong.
And that's what I think is the value of having more actual conditioning classes and athletic training classes, and why they're so important, because dance, you automatically are getting that overlapping effect. Kids are taking how many different styles, and there are different styles. Yes, they're getting different technique, but the body mechanics are just being replicated a lot over and over and over again, that there's not much of a break happening. You're doing different, again, like you're doing different styles and different technique, but a leg extension is a leg extension. You're lifting your leg. I don't care if it's in a parallel or turned up position. You're still bottoming it to your face. You're still going up on your, like, you're still using a lot of the same movements. Mm-hmm. It's just for different patterns or for a little bit different tweaks of mechanics. But like, you're using the same muscles and you're using them in the same way. You're all turned out. That's what we're trying to do. Like,
yeah, that's where everything's kind of starting from.
Yeah.
And yeah,
to where you're not building the structure to be able to handle that load. You're just going, do the load, keep pushing it, keep doing more.
Right. Yeah.
Dance harder, dance faster.
Yep. And that's a lot of the advice that is in the dance world, is like, well, just do more of it. And there's a point of diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. And people are there most of the time, probably. Mm-hmm. The same thing you see in the gym with gym bros and people that are just there too much, is you're probably at the point of diminishing returns. You're doing too much and it's not benefiting anymore.
Well, and that's what was really cool, and going back to, I guess, even like the moral aspect of it with one of the Monday class that we teach together. It was chaos in the beginning. Like, they just were not, I don't know, like just a lot of behavior issues, to where I think that's where we put our focus heavily on. Was like, we are not going to focus as much on technique and then getting them down to the skills of all of that. We need to make sure that when they leave at the end of this year, like, they are different kids. Like, well, it's like they know how to handle class. They know how to handle us. Like, it's like with one of them, like, she has to leave for volleyball every time. It was more important to me that she got in the respect and the structure and the function of her remembering on her own. I don't care if she's 7, for her to remember on her own to tell us at the beginning of class, hey, letting you know I got to leave early again. Yeah. And it's like, when she started doing that and remembering, like, that is a win. I don't care if you can't freaking put your leg in a passe and it looks good every single time. Like, you being able to do that is awesome. But second to that is focusing more on training them in this way, adding in the technique. There was less time that we needed to take on a lot of the simple things because they knew how to move their body better. Yeah. It's like, we go in a passe and we're talking about, again, lengthening of the spine and having everything kind of stacked on top of each other. We're doing a lot of these other things that they know how to maneuver their body better now, that we're saying, like, tuck the hips in. Like, I need your back to be straight. I don't even need to tell them how to do it. Right. I just go, this is the result I need. Figure it out. And it's like, they immediately know how to adjust. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we're taking time away to actually go over the technique and the function, but you work on getting their body structured and mechanically sound. The body's going to work a little bit better in these ways because they know how to actually mind muscle connection. Yeah, because you're actually telling them things that's how the body works, and it makes sense. It's like you're telling them, tuck the tailbone, elongate the spine, or whatever. Great. They are understanding that because they know what the cue even means. You know, we have them laying flat on the ground doing these W movements, and it's like, your whole back needs to be flat to the ground. So push your spine into the ground. Your lower back, because everybody wants to arch. Mm-hmm. And that naturally pushing them in tucks their tailbone a little bit. Mm-hmm. So then when you go, we're doing something and we need that same pattern. Bring the ground to the floor. Or bring the floor to standing up. How would you do the same thing? Yep. Remember how we do these W movements and what we tell you to do? That's what you need to do standing now. And then all of a sudden, all of them tuck their tailbone and back gets straight. And now they're moving from the position that they're supposed to be moving for dance. There's these parallels with it. But they're able to use that and build upon it and continue to build upon it because the cues actually make sense and they work and they're correct. Mm-hmm. When you're telling people to lift with their glutes, their leg in front of them,
there's this disconnection because that's not how the body works. And now they can't take that and build upon other things. You know how we do this over here? We'll do it over here now. Well, no, because this isn't even how you do it. But when we go, hey, activate your hip flexor and your quad to lift your leg. Now when we go to do something else and I'm like, okay, we're doing jumping exercises. You know how we talk about lifting your leg in front of you and doing, okay, well, we're doing jumps where you're going to have to switch legs and bring that leg in front of you. So what I want you to think is explosion from the calf and the quad. We got to bend a little bit to jump. So make sure we're bending a little bit to jump and then come up. And then when we switch legs in front of us, think about lifting the leg like what we've been practicing of explode that quad and explode that hip flexor. And it's just like this whip that comes through versus before where it's like, oh, I just kind of like float my leg up there and whatever because I'm trying to lift with my glute and now I'm like off balance and awkward and whatever. It's like, yeah, because that's not what the glute does.
Yeah.
So you can build upon them when you're giving the right things.
What's your thought on that too? Like, same thing, like building up leaps across the floor, like the prep, the jump before that. I feel like I grew up hearing like the bigger the jump, the better. Like get as low to the ground as you can because like the bigger the jump, the bigger that you'll be able to opposite.
Yes and no. I mean, there's a point of diminishing returns. Like if you go too low, you're going to lose all of
like power, right?
Yeah, you're going to lose all your power and because you're really most of where you're going to be jumping from is your quad and your calf. So you really want to load them to the point of them being, how do I say this so it makes sense? You don't want them to be stretched out so much because the more that I bend, the more that I bend down, the more elongated my quad is going to be. And this is where the hamstring comes into play too, is like you are loading the hamstring to then jump up. But it's like when you think about squats, there's this transfer of kind of what's doing the work. If you're going, low enough to where you're getting past all knee flexion or knee bend and whatever, and you've got all the weight loaded on your hamstrings, and then you go to start to stand up, your quads now start to take over, and then your hips are coming up and forward and your glutes are getting activated. So there's a point of diminishing returns where you're not going to jump as high because you're losing all of that pressure per se, all that tension is a better word. So when you then go to jump, it's like you're jumping with a deflated balloon kind of thing. Like it's all gone to where you want to build that tension, like you're building that spring up to then explode more. And a better cue or a better idea to think about it is getting them to connect to, it's my calf and my quad doing this, so I need to explode those as much as I can. Because all of the, at least for dancers, this is dancer specific, because most of your movements are resulting in a quad flexion anyways when you go to jump. If I'm just doing, ballet jumps, whatever, standing, or I'm going across, that's all calf and quad. If I'm doing a jump and I have to extend my leg out, it's calf and quad. Jumping, quad is now flexed and extended. Like it's so much calf and quad. There's just not a lot of hamstring activation going on. So it's not about as low as you can get. It's about hitting that perfect point and then exploding out of it. That's where you're going to get more of the leap. It's not about the depth that you come from. It's about how much muscle activation can I get coming out of it.
Okay. What are some of maybe the main things that you've noticed that we're doing backwards?
Well, the stretching at the beginning of the class is.
And explain why that's crazy.
The stretching at the beginning of the class, like when you think about it from the CNS perspective, you're telling your nervous system to calm down and to relax, and that's what stretching is doing, especially with going to the muscles. We're stretching everything out. We're getting everything super pliable and just like elongated, and the way that I'm talking about it should give the cue of like what I'm trying to get across. It's like, oh, let's just go to sleep and do this type of thing. And then we're going into class and trying to be explosive. Those don't pair up. And it's like you're telling your CNS to calm down and come to a sympathetic or parasympathetic state and get really relaxed. And then now we're going to do leaps across the floor. And it's like, ugh. Now you're jolting your body awake. You just told your muscles to relax, and now you're telling them to contract as hard as they possibly can. To where you need to prime the muscles to get ready to contract as much as they can. So dynamic warm-ups. We're doing warm-ups where we're moving our body and we're putting ourselves into positions and getting out of them. And it's all about movement and accelerating that movement upwards. So most of the stuff that I start with is just all walking across the floor, like knee hug, pull the leg behind. It's just getting the body warmed up. And then as we go, we start to do like, okay, quicker feet stuff. We're doing, karaoke, and we're doing like high knee skips and high knee runs and like Frankenstein walks and Frankenstein run. And we're just building up the intensity and the requirement of your body. Basically, we're telling it that, hey, we're about
to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah. And it's really, you're warming up the muscles and the joints and ligaments and all that stuff. That's going to happen. But really what you're trying to do is telling your CNS, hey, we're about to like get going. And you want your body to be ready to handle that so that you can fire with all the muscle fibers, and it's warmed and primed and ready to do that, rather than coming from a super relaxed state and now we're doing leaps across the floor, or we're going by the bar and we're telling our leg to lift with using no activation in the muscles that actually do it. It's like you're just kind of compounding the problem by starting off with stretching. The stretching can be at the end of the class, but even then I would suggest like
know what your dancer's schedule is going to be potentially.
Right. If they're all going to classes after that, well, why am I going to bring them back down to a parasympathetic state when they're going to go get ramped back up in the next class? So like for one of the groups that I teach, I am their first class of the night. So we're not stretching at the end of the class because they're going to go dance a bunch. I just rev them up
and send them on their way.
Send them on their way. Go to the next class where their bodies are really ready to go do the next thing. It's the same like warming up for anything that you do. You should be warming up getting ready to do the thing that you're about to do. And I think that's maybe where there's a disconnect of maybe what dancers think they're doing in class, of like, well, we're stretching out because that's what we're going to be. We're going to be elongating a lot during the class.
Exactly. That's what it is. Yep.
And it's just, no, like they're going to get stretched out or warmed up and whatever by doing the dynamic movements. But
it's like
then
a
they're going to be ready.
We're going to go across the floor and we're going to do leaps, and our leg is going to be in a full split. So we got to do splits. Yeah,
no, you don't. You need to like warm up and get ready for the jumps and the muscle contractions that are going to be happening, the aggressive ones in something like jumping, and then that sort of movement with jumping of extending the legs. They're flexible enough. You've been working on that for a long time.
Well, it's like what I always tell before we do mobility in any of my baby classes. It's like, okay, how many of you can grab your leg and bring it to your head? Okay, now how many of you can do that with no hands? That should be the same number. How many of you can go into the splits? Now, how many of you can go across the floor and hit that split every single time? That should be the same amount of people. And you should be able to do that all the way up until you're 18 years old. That starts to get lower and lower and lower and lower.
Yeah. Because you can be flexible and stretched out. And that's something that's funny or interesting too, is like being able to be that flexible isn't so much about your muscles able to do that. It's about
another misconception.
Yeah. It's your CNS that is comfortable enough to allow you to get into that position. Something that Peter Attia talked about when patients would come into the hospital and they would be unconscious. They can fold those people, move their body, like bend them in half, like any flexibility position that the body would naturally allow anyways, they can pretty much do.
It's not that your structure isn't allowing it.
Yeah, it's not that your structure or your musculature isn't allowing it. And then when they would wake it back up and you would tell them something like that, hey, like, look at this photo. Like, you're bent in half. And they're like, I can't touch my toes. It's like, yes, that's your CNS that's not allowing you to do that. You're not, it doesn't feel comfortable enough to allow you to be in that position. So that's really what you're working on when you're stretching. That's why the breathing of it is important, of like deep breath in and then longer breath out, because you're trying to get the parasympathetic system to relax and just like everything to that come to the forefront so that you're relaxing. So now when you're doing that growing up, you're kind of just doing a skill that you already have and keeping it consistent. Always having your body feel comfortable to be stretched and be in those positions. And you need to continue that, and that's important. But what's not being worked on is the strength in those positions. And that's what the mobility comes in, of what you were talking about, of like, can you lift your leg into that position without the assistance of your hands or your, whatever. Mm-hmm. Dancers have so much of that flexibility because that's what's practiced and just drilled. And I mean, you're stretching before class. Of course, you're going to be good at that. But now what you're losing is strength and explosiveness. And the dancers now are just, they're maybe able to hit the graceful stuff, but when you need them to like explode, or even there's a point where they can't be graceful in a certain position, like jumping and doing something that looks really nice, because they don't have the explosiveness with it either, mm-hmm. because they've never practiced it and they don't have the strength for it.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I go, you're going to get people that are like, but I have dancers that do that. Like they can hit a full split every single time. And like, it pops, it looks good. Like they physically can do it. Yes. Well, how many people in the dance world that have been dancing that they are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and you can't dance anymore? That's what shows you what the problem is. Yeah. It's not impressive if your 16-year-old student can do that. If your 8-year-old student can do that. Sure. There's a little part of that of like their bodies are just pushing themselves to be able to do that. There's also a little bit of like the weight distribution and how they're able to just kind of fling their, like they might have a little bit of natural muscle because of their age, but that is a problem if you are getting into your older ages or you're the teacher now and you can't do that. That shows that when you were 16 or 8 years old and you're doing that, it shouldn't go away. You shouldn't be able to not just have the capability of able to do that, or there's pain when you do that.
Well, and every older dancer is dealing with pain. Yeah. It's like you don't have to be, and you're not supposed to be. Like you're not in a physical contact sport where mm-hmm. you're getting your knee clipped from the side and destroyed. Like there's not, they call them contact injuries or non-contact injuries. You're having all non-contact injuries, and non-contact injuries are most of the time overuse, mm-hmm. Lack of body mechanics moving in the correct ways, in the correct positions, and recovery and that sort of stuff. And I think
being it's just sore and injured all the time is not just, we dance all the time.
You shouldn't be injured, for sure.
Yes.
If you're sore, okay, your body might be getting used to this amount of load, and it can get to that point.
When you're dancing that much, like how often is that happening? That's just probably your new baseline. If you haven't danced in a couple of weeks and then you go take a class and you're sore, okay.
Right. But
that
the
shouldn't
injuries,
be a constant.
The injuries shouldn't be there. There's ways to...
An 8-year-old should not have a chronic injury. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, a 16-year-old shouldn't.
Like, the amount of kids that you see that they have, everything is taped up.
Yeah.
It's like, there's your sign that the education, the curriculum is misguided.
But it's so normalized that everybody's just got injuries in that world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 4 or 5 kids in the older class that I teach that have come to me and like, I feel like I pulled my hamstring, or I feel like my hip flexor's this, like so many of them. I thought I was going to walk into more hip flexor problem stuff. More of them, it's hamstring. My hamstring. There's like 3 of them with hamstring problems. Mm-hmm. That's like, yeah, makes sense. They're weak. Mm-hmm. Like you never are working them and doing anything for them. Mm-hmm. And then when you're needing to do something with them that requires a lot of load or a lot of explosiveness, you can't handle it. It's because it's never getting worked on. There's a balancing act, and that's a lot of just how I view it. As I'm not there to make you better dancers. I'm basically here to like do the opposite of everything you're doing, because you're overdoing it in all these other areas. We're not going to now do a bunch of calves. Like we're not going to come in and do a bunch of front leg lifts and whatever, like I'm going to do very minimal amount of that so I can kind of teach you how you should be thinking about it. But we're not going to overdo it. We're going to do it super simple and not a lot of load. And then like we're going to work on the other stuff that's going to make you a better athlete for dance. Well, more performative. That
was the biggest switch even for me when I noticed when I stopped training, like when I stopped taking class as much, but started working like lifting. It's like when I started getting my muscles stronger, that's when all of the jumps started to become a little bit easier. I was able to produce a little bit more power and I was getting way less drained. My cardio was so much better when I was dancing because like my machine was stronger to be able to do all these movements that I was telling my body, you're going to do it anyways. So it's like I wasn't fatiguing as quickly.
Well, yeah, because everybody thinks about endurance as just like the lungs.
Yeah.
And that's what dancers are training is like more cardio and the lungs part of it. Well, there's the muscle endurance part of it. That's more important. You need to have more muscle endurance than you do. The cardio will come. If you're going to be dancing and doing routines, you're going to get to, or you're already going to have enough lung capacity cardio to do that. What you need is the muscle endurance to be able to do that dance full out from start to finish and not die and not like this jump isn't going to be great because it's at the end and it's my most explosive movement and I have nothing left. Because
it's like your lungs could maybe handle it. You're maybe out of breath or whatever, but it's your muscle fatigue is what's going to not allow you to do that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you know? Well, and that's okay. So going back to the stretching thing, just to wrap up on that. I think that's also where properly educating the kids with that. And again, life lessons aspect of it is in an ideal world, you have every dancer's full curriculum. Like it's developed top to bottom. So, you know, it's not just, this is my class, this is their class, this is their class. It's what does their night look like? Yeah. So I know I'm their jazz teacher at the end of the night. So like my responsibility is to wrap up their night. I'm not going to do an explosive warm up or anything because they should have done that at the 4 p.m. class. I'm 9 p.m. I'm doing the wrap up. Like that kid's night needs to be one long program.
Yeah.
Not individual classes and what individual classes are they getting.
Yeah.
That is a lot. And I get when you have hundreds and hundreds of kids, that is also a lot.
You need all the teachers on the same page, and that's a lot.
I think it's highly recommended. But I think that's where the education to the kid needs to come in as well of how are you starting the day? How are you ending the day? You might want to take a couple minutes after class is done to stretch before you hop in mom's car and drive away, and then you come back the next day and you feel like crap.
Yeah.
It's like maybe they need to have a little bit more of an awareness and teaching them that. I think that's important as well. But
yeah, and I think if it's easy for me going into it because I'm already going to be doing opposite stuff.
Yeah.
For you going into it, it's almost like I need to know what these other teachers are doing a lot of the time with them so that at least this is the way that I think it should be, so that I can do different stuff with them because I'm probably going to get more growth and production out of them by doing the other things rather than just packing on what the other person's already doing. Like if they've already got these things, they're doing the pliés, they're doing the bar and all that kind of good stuff. I get doing more of it is repetitions and it's going to be good, but as a teacher, you could be bringing a whole other element that is going to assist in that and make it that production and that growth even faster and faster. Like where you're going to get more growth or faster growth, I should say, is not by just repeating the same stuff over and over and over again and doing a million of them. You're going to get good, but what's really going to help is you doing the things that nobody's doing and implementing it into their whole program. And now they're getting every element. And now it's like, wow, why can you do this so well? Well, this teacher tells me in this movement to activate these muscles, and this is what it should feel like and look like. And now I'm applying it to this. And I took from what you said of doing this thing, and over here now in my jazz class, like I'm able to look a lot cleaner and better with all my movements that I'm doing over here because the ballet's helping. And it's like, you're having all, like, you're having this collaboration work really well because everybody's giving different beneficial things, to where it seems like there's a lot of just, well, you just need to do more of this and you do more of that. You want to work on your jumps, you got to do it. You got to do more of them.
You have a turns and leaps class in your schedule now. You got to have a private.
Yeah.
And that's again where like the overtraining comes in, is there's just a lot of lackluster classes.
Well, it's like you have a turns and leaps class now, but why is the ballet teacher still doing turns and leaps in her class?
And the jazz teacher.
Yep. So.
And you have a contemporary class, so you're probably doing turns and leaps.
Yeah. So now we're just doing the same stuff 4 classes in a row.
Yep.
Or at least parts of the classes, to where, no, they should be designated for their groups. Like my class is strength and sports performance. It's not, how do I like...
Well, but do that. Then you have a conditioning class moves on your schedule. They should not be just doing a bunch of cardio stuff and abs and stretching and intense stretching. It's like, no, have your, like, if you're, again, like, this education is not as known, I guess, or not as relevant. And I think that's a part of the problem and why it's like cool that you're able to bring in what you can bring, because I think it's actually benefiting the kids and not just doing like a bunch of random stuff. But
yeah,
it's like, that's just a waste of their time. And it's a waste of, now kids are already overtraining a lot in dance, but it's just hard to avoid because they are trying to get all of the skills and all of the styles in a schedule. But that's where it starts to become a waste of time, because you really shouldn't need a turns and leaps class if they are functioning their body properly. Because again, it's like what I said, we have to spend less time on technique because they know how to fix their body. So now we can just advance. It's not a lot of times you're going over just the how to properly move your body in these technical positions. It's like, if your body functions properly, you can just focus on the effectiveness of that, not the correction of how your body's supposed to be working in those ways.
Totally. Well, it's the efficiency conversation, because you could do a lot of output, but if it's really well constructed and intelligent, you won't have all the injuries, or you won't have the exhaustion and all that kind of stuff. They can have 5 classes in a night and not feel destroyed.
Yeah.
But, you know, everybody in their weird way wants to be the, 30-minute hit instructor. They want to throw their like 15-20 minutes of hard stuff in the, like, hard lung output stuff in the class, when it's like, no, just teach ballet. Like, we'll do that over here.
Sure.
Or like, just teach jazz. They're going to naturally get it with what they're having to do in that class. Conditioning class, even if people call my class conditioning class, it's like, yes, if that's what and whatever, but we're not running around and getting conditioned. Like, sure, I'm conditioning you for dance, but it's not conditioning in the way that you maybe intend or initially thinking. It's not like we're doing a bunch of like burpees and like running around, and like it's basically an hour and a half of just like nonstop whatever. You go in my class, it looks boring. Super boring. You walk in and it's like kids are just like sitting on the ground talking to each other, and then I'm like, okay, here we go, next set, another 5 on the left, 5 on the right, go ahead. And they just like slowly move through these positions with lots of muscle like, it's so boring to watch. It's so boring for them to do, I'm sure. But like, this is the stuff that they should be doing. I don't need to get their cardio up. It's fine. What they need is strength and more connectivity and understanding how the body works and how to move it correctly. Yeah.
Well, and the appreciation of their body, I think, changes, and the appreciation of how it can move and it can work for them. And like, I don't know. I think, again, just like the overall life lessons aspect of it, it's like, what are we teaching if we're just saying, push it, push it, push it, dance bigger, dance harder, go crazier, but then they're getting injured all the time.
Well, and
it's like, you're going to have a bad relationship with your physical body if it's constantly in pain. Or, I mean, a lot of people listening, if you're in the older generation of teachers, like we have a few dance teachers that listen to this, like if you are that older age group and you're in pain, that's not good. So let's avoid that when they're younger and teach them how to actually take care of themselves. And by doing these kinds of things, it's like one of our students, she's maybe 7, like after this year, she told us, she's like, every day now I'm doing a workout and I'm eating healthier. And like, she prides herself when she's getting things. It's like, she wants to work with the heaviest band. When we're doing box jumps, she wants to do the box that the boys are jumping on, that's just higher. It's like, she wants to do the more challenging things. You think she cares that like their dances are winning or not winning, or she's getting this trick or what? Like, she is valuing her physical ability and strength. That will bleed into when she goes into the jazz class, when she goes into the other things, because she knows like, my body is freaking capable and I know how to get it even more capable and more effective and more more efficient and effective. Let's just say that I don't know, like that can be carried longer.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna help everything. It's gonna help them be more connected and understand things better, because you were saying like, dance bigger or push harder or whatever. I don't like those, because again, that's like, in a way it's subjective. Well, maybe they are for what they're capable of. And also like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Dance bigger means something in your brain of what you're wanting to see, but they need objective things to dance bigger. What are you talking about though? Because dance bigger is going to mean something different to all 15 of these kids in this class. You need objective things that they can do. Even
that in their hip hop recital stuff, like that same girl, when we were talking about like, the effort is not there. Like, you guys are just not trying as much. Like, this spot looks messy. Why? And she's like listing off, well, I wasn't bending my legs. So like, I had no control in my core, so I wasn't able to move my arms. It's like, she's able to diagnose, hey, your arms looked a little funky. It's in your legs. Like, the power and the stability is not there. So now your arms look floppy. It's like a 7-year-old is able to do that, which is so awesome. But it's like that connection of, how does my body work? So I'm not going to get as frustrated when I can't get that turn, because I understand why it's happening. How many kids are just dancing like, I don't know why it doesn't look good. I don't know why I can't do it. I don't know why I can't get my leg there. I don't know why I can't jump that way. I don't know why I can't turn and do all these tricks. When they can understand why their body is working or not working, in what ways and how they actually are able to achieve it, there's that confidence, because you can learn how to be capable on your own. Yeah. Then what the stuff that your teachers are telling you is actually connecting as well.
Well, and it's not like, oh, I think your leap just needs to be more explosive. Okay, well, how do you do that? Right. It's like,
jump higher.
Yeah, jump higher. Sure.
Great. I'll try that next time. Sorry.
I mean, it's amazing how many times like we'll do jumps or we'll whatever, and it's like, okay, after the first time, I'm like, all right, how do we jump? And like some of you raise their hand like, we bend our legs. I'm like, yes, bend your legs. You fish out of water. Why are you not bending your legs? Yeah. Like, people don't know how to do things. So you say jump higher, they're not even bending their legs.
And what happens?
Yeah. They just crunch everything up. They don't even know how to jump, period. And now you're telling them to jump higher. It's like, this person's not bending their legs. We need to start there. So it's like all of the breaking it down. It can't just be jump higher. It can't be these blanket, do this. Well, how do you do it? That should always be it. Dance bigger. Well, how do you do it? There needs to be objective tools for them to be able to grasp and understand of what you're wanting or meaning. I mean, one of the moves being this arm swing, and it's like, oh, you guys just need to dance bigger. Well, what does that mean? Now they just start flailing their body back and forth, when literally all you meant was, this needs to be a big extended rainbow, not this little crunchy windshield wiper thing. Yeah, crunchy windshield wiper. Yeah. So you say dance bigger, and then it's not going in the way you want it to. You need to be objective. Yeah. You need to give them something. Right. Multiple things, probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like, okay, extension of the arm. Well, how do you control an extension of the arm without your tiny body flailing all over the place. Like, you can have your arms straight and flail all around, but it's going to look crazy then because you don't know how to stop that. You don't know how to start that movement and control it. Where is that power even coming from? Like, they're just going to like whip their arms around. It's like, well, you need to be structured in your shoulder blade and in your back, and then also trickle down effect. Your legs are straight.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen because
your
upper body does not have the control to be able to do that.
Yeah. I love the performance and the athletic and that part of the dance world. Like, it's interesting to me, and it's cool to figure out how to get them to be more explosive, more in control, more strength, all that kind of stuff. Like, I really like this part of it. It's just the image and the attitude part of it that I feel like could be better. Mm-hmm. It could be more honest and more integrity and not just have the weirdness with it.
Yeah.
Because like I love, that's all I'm about is athletic performance. I that stuff is so interesting to me, and it's so cool, and it's fun to break it down. It's fun to talk about it. It's fun to implement it. It's fun to see kids start from one place, and after a year they're at this place, and then another year they're at this place. And then I think it's just along the ways trying to keep that, like,
but let's make you good people too.
Yeah. Let's make you a good person and have integrity and be honest. And I mean, I used to deal with kids just walking out of class. They wouldn't show back up. And it's like, now we're at the point in the class where, hey, can I go to the bathroom? Hey, this, mm-hmm. Hey, like, they're asking to go because I made it a rule, quote unquote, but I've tried to make it an understanding between the two of, like, if you need to go to the bathroom or go get something or your water's outside, that's fine. But don't have the disrespect for the class. Mm-hmm. I mean, people would just walk out and not come back.
Yeah.
And I had kids do that, and they came back in, and I'm like, you're allowed to stay here, but 50 squats.
Yeah.
And we're not doing this anymore because next time you're not allowed back in.
Right.
There's that level of, like, why is this happening? And because it's my fault. Like, sure. I didn't make it something right away in the beginning, so now this is happening. Mm-hmm. And maybe it happens in other classes and they're fine with it, so this is just their natural thing. I don't know. But, like, this ain't going to happen anymore. And this, to me, like, this is a capable, respectful person thing.
Yep.
You can't just walk out of class and not ask, not say anything, yep. Not whatever, and then come back in like nothing happened and just assimilate yourself back into the group. Like, no, why are you doing this? What's yep. going on? It's like, we're not doing the phone thing. You're not gonna have your phone in your pocket during class. Like, there's certain respect. We're here to do something. I'm gonna respect you, you respect me, all that kind of stuff. That is the important stuff. The dance and the performance, that's secondary.
Well, and that's what I think has been really cool watching you teach, because we got to teach together this year. Like, it's really apparent the benefit of promoting the group thought and the team building stuff. Like, it's really cool to see then now with the younger kids how they are doing it on their own, and also, like, implementing group consequences that way. Like, one person will get in trouble. They're not just going, yep, sucks for you. You got to do 50 squats. Like, their initial is then, let's just do them together so it's better for her, or so that she mm-hmm. doesn't feel left out. Like, that is so much more beyond dancing.
Yeah.
Like, and I think the awareness of it's not just about you. So as much as, yeah, you're really good and maybe you're technically better than everybody in here, but you are not getting special treatment because of that. Like, we're expecting you to still behave in the same way. We're expecting you to still put in the same effort, even though these things are maybe coming naturally to you. Like, we're still expecting the same effort as the person that's struggling, and we're going to praise you the same way. We're going to make this an equal playing field that no matter who you are, like, we're valuing effort over talent, because the effort is also going to turn into talent, as we know that. But Yeah, I think like in the ways that you are talking of where we're screwing up or where the dance energy kind of gets funky, I feel like you're doing a really good job of implementing that in the class of like, not here. Like, we're not going to do that. And it's, the kids are changing so much quicker than I've seen in the past. Like, I've been teaching for a long time now. And I think those are the things that I will continue to remind myself of and carry and add in. It's like, I've always tried to teach for the kid and teach to build them so much more than the ability level. But yeah, bringing that whole new element of that in, I think has been important, of the team building and the not singling kids out and kind of letting that play out has been cool.
Well, there's such a individualistic idea in dance. It's about me and it's about my success, and it's about how do I rise to the top and how do I be the best one and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's maybe a healthy level of that, but most people are doing routines and doing dances in a group with 2 other people, with 5 other people. The dance is going to be most successful if you dance as a team, if you dance as a group, not if your star player is doing a bunch of great stuff, but then everybody else is not great. So trying to get across to the kids of, hey, this is a team effort. Chain is only as strong as the weakest link type of thing. And like, that's great.
And if you're the best, support and lift.
Exactly. That's great that you're getting all of this and you're really good at it and can do a lot. But how this will look and perform and score, I guess you could say, is based on all of you. So if you see somebody needs help, give them the help and encourage them. This isn't a dog eat dog world here, like in this classroom.
Yep.
This isn't going to be how it's run. This is a team. We're going to do team building exercises. We're going to rely on our teammates. We're going to support our teammates. Like, it's all about the team and building the team, because if you can all buy in together, everything else is going to be way, way better, instead of these like, well, I'm the all-star and I'm going to be in the center and I'm going to be front row and I'm going to do all my tricks and I'm going to do the cool stuff and everybody else can just do whatever they do. But this is about me and my performance. It's like, that's not helpful. Like, you don't want to hang out with that person when they're 30. You're not the all-star dancer anymore. We don't just like you because you're good at this and you make our routines look cool. Like, you want to hang out with the person that is really good at it all, but they're also super helpful and super nice to you and respectful to you and have the conversations with you. Like, that's the person you want to hang out with when they're 30, not the all-star that was only ever about them.
Yeah. I remember you saying that one day, one of the guys, like, you're not going to have any friends if you do that. People don't like people that do that.
Yeah.
And it was just like them being so selfish and like,
well, this is,
not paying attention to anybody else, or they were going on their own time or whatever. And they're like, people don't like people do that.
I think other people maybe see it as harsh, but to me, I feel like I'm protecting this kid.
Yes.
That I'm like,
that's annoying if you do that.
People will not like you if you're like this.
Yes.
And you won't have friends, and that's not fun. Like, that's not good. Kids don't know that. They're not your age.
Right.
They don't know, well, when I get to their age, like, I'm just going to have friends because I have them at school and whatever. It's like, no, people will start to choose, hey, I don't want to be around this person anymore because they only think about themselves and they're selfish and whatever. So I'm trying to go, no, you got to be about the team. Care about the person next to you and respect them, and don't do things that benefit you and take away from them. There is a way that it benefits everybody and it'll be good for everybody. So we have to find that way and figure that out and do it. It's like, your individual success doesn't mean anything. You're going to be at the top, quote unquote, but that's going to be lonely because nobody's going to care or want. And as soon as you fall a little bit, they're going to be all over it.
Yep.
And you're going to have no support.
Yep.
And this world is not good. It's so painful when you have no support.
Yep. And you said that too. Like, hey, remember when you got on her because she couldn't get this? Now you can't get this?
Yeah.
Like, flipping on, like, let's just all plan that we're going to fail sometimes. So prep for that, and everybody, let's just, watch out for each other and help each other. And when you're struggling, support and lift the person that's below you. And it's like you said we have a set of brothers. It's like kind of the same attitude, but it could go for everybody. Like, if you focus on making the ones underneath you better, it's going to make you better, because now you're going to have to elevate to stay better than them.
Yep.
And they'll be able to push you even further or show you different things so that you're able to get better. Like, it doesn't hurt to ever try to make someone else achieve what they want to achieve or to become better.
No, it makes you better.
Yeah.
Makes you better. The more that you're surrounding yourself with success and support and all that kind of stuff, like, you're going to get that in return, most likely. It's not this it shouldn't be the all about me and my success, because you're now not utilizing a tool that you could utilize.
Yeah.
If I'm playing a video game and I'm beating, my whatever 6-year-old niece every single time, it's not fun anymore, because I'm just beating them all the time, and I'm not getting any better. For my own selfish reasons, I'm not getting better at this thing. But if I teach them how to do it really well, now we can have some healthy competition, and now we're both getting better together and we're exceeding through the roof. But if you're just making it this unhealthy competition of it's all about me and my success, at the end of the day, you're not going to have friends and support. You're going to have a weird relationship with competition and other people, because you don't know how to communicate and you don't know how to be happy for other people's success along with your own. It's going to be all about my success is determined on how do I push you down into the dirt further and further and further. And that's not how it should work.
Yeah. And I think as a teacher, as an educator, there's finding ways to implement the team more and less about pushing them against each other. Because I think that happens too. Like, you almost plant enemies within your students.
Yeah. That should not be happening.
Like, well, she's going to go in the front because she's been doing this or she's been whatever. Right. It's like, great. Now that kid is in the front and you're rewarding that behavior, but now that kid hates her, not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big responsibility.
It really is.
I think you need to treat it as such.
Yeah, I think everybody should treat it as such. Because we get into these positions where we don't like where the world's at. Well,
who's in charge of the kids?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Who's in charge of the kids? I think we should end it there. Unless you have any other closing thoughts and feelings.
No, I think I'm good.
Cool.
What's our preview for next week?
Summer fun in the sun. All about how to be successful in the summer and not fall off the wagon. And do it healthily and with balance, and where you can still have fun. But we know that summer brings a lot of different activities and fun activities to take advantage of. So it's like, how can we optimize it and even take fuller advantage of it?
Yeah.
And then how to kind of still stay consistent so that you don't go into the school year or the next season or when it starts to get cold out and you're like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Like in the dance world, they call them summer intensives. It's like, that's a little bit what the conversation is like. It's a summer intensive.
We got to bring that back this summer. It's like, really, like, it's intense. It's summer intensive.
Yeah.
And the kids are like, I feel like you're taking this intense thing like way too literally. It's like, I don't think you're taking it hard enough.
Yeah. It wasn't named this for not being intense.
Yeah. Yeah. So trying to maybe give you some tips, reminders, kind of just like, let's do a check-in. Let's do a podcast digital check-in with everybody. Let's kind of like regroup and make sure that we're going into the summer with a good game plan.
A summer sauce up.
Summer sauce up.
All right.
Bye.
See you later.